I dated my husband's best friend. 6 stories about female infidelity. For some, adultery is impossible under any circumstances. Some consider such an act an extreme measure, and some decide on it without thinking. 6 Russian women anonymously told Gazeta, rue their personal stories and explained why at some point they stopped being faithful to their man. And a psychologist and sexologist commented on such a phenomenon as female infidelity. Woman, 35. We lied to our families about business and then rushed to a hotel with an hourly rate, maternity leave, restrictions due to the pandemic, a husband working remotely. All this turned my life into something dull and monotonous. The news about meeting with school friends excited me. You're getting ready as if you have a lover waiting for you around the corner, my husband joked that day. He couldn't even imagine that the mother of an 11-month-old son would go crazy after some class reunion. I once had a crush on a boy who sat at the desk behind me. I remember doing my hair every day to please him. One day I heard a voice from behind me. This is the prettiest one, do it like this. The school crush never developed into anything, but even at university I often thought about this guy. We never talked after finishing school, although there were plenty of opportunities. At least half of the class came to the class reunion. We sat far from each other, but for a moment our eyes met, and a shiver ran through my body. From that moment on, I was sure that something would continue between us. And so it happened. The only option for meetings is hourly hotels. The first time I was embarrassed to go there, but I really wanted to. He has a family, 2 children. I have a husband and a small son, whom I had to leave with one of my relatives when I had to leave home. I wriggled around in lies like a snake on hot coals. For a woman on maternity leave, this is an extremely difficult task. The affair lasted for several months. During this time, I lost more than 10 kilograms and was madly pleased with myself in the mirror. My husband complimented me, said that motherhood had done me good. It's strange how he didn't notice the obvious. I must have cheated on him so brazenly that he couldn't even imagine that his wife was capable of such a thing. My lover suggested ending our meetings, which I didn't expect at all, and was even offended at first. His wife turned out to be more perceptive than my husband and suspected infidelity. I had to put an end to it. Yes, after some time he called and suggested meeting again, but by that time I had cooled down. Do I regret it? In a sense, yes, because infidelity is mean, and I admit it. On the other hand, I console myself with the fact that without this episode, I would hardly have lost the extra weight so quickly. And I looked at my husband with different eyes. Woman, 29. I stole a guy from a girl to sleep with him as revenge on my husband. I cheated on my husband during a business trip. Or rather, I went on a business trip to finally do it. There were 3 candidates. One of them was so deaf that he did not understand my intentions, although they were unambiguous. The second did not inspire sympathy and was considered by me as a last resort. Frankly speaking, I stole the third from a competitor. Yes, the young man was paying attention to another girl, and she just batted her eyelashes, and I mentally told her, "Girl, move over. It's time for real women. You don't have to thank me for the master class." Everything was very easy. It was enough to massage his collar zone for a minute right in the taxi. The main thing is how to do it and how to look into the eyes, not staring, but playfully. He did not approach that girl again. I know that those with whom I went on a business trip condemned me behind my back. I know that they whispered because everything was obvious. I decided to cheat because of revenge on my husband, who was once caught cheating. I do not regret it and do not intend to regret it. It was great. Woman, 26 years old. After this betrayal, I was able to forgive myself only after 5 years. I had a student marriage. We got married 6 months after we met, and literally a month and a half after the wedding, I got pregnant. Then everything went according to the classics. My husband worked. I sat at home with the child. It was very hard for me both physically and mentally because I had just graduated from college and did not even have time to work. Most of my girlfriends were busy with cool projects and didn't understand my motherhood at all. There were no grandparents around. I didn't have time to make friends in the city where I moved to live. My husband started going on business trips often. He went to work on weekends. I was very burnt out. We started arguing constantly. Then it got even worse and my husband started coming home drunk. I was terribly angry and felt worthless. One day, when my husband came home in the morning, I decided to take revenge on him. We met a guy on a messenger. The conversation immediately turned to intimate topics. We set the day X. At that time, I was no longer worked a lot on the side and spent almost a month's income on a nanny. I went to my new friend's house, and we had sex that same evening. It was very mediocre. I didn't get any pleasure or experience. On top of that, he turned out to be not a very good person. He knew my whole difficult situation, but he didn't even offer to take me back home or spend any time together after sex. I was returning alone to my child and crying. If I took revenge on anyone, it was only on myself. My husband didn't know about this meeting and will never know, because we soon divorced. I only added emotional problems to myself. I regretted this action for a very long time and was able to forgive myself only 5 years later. Woman 37. My husband told me, "If you really want it, I don't mind." I was 33 years old, and at that time I had been married for about 7 years. At some point, I realized that in my relationship with my husband, we had become more like relatives than husband and wife. Sex first became routine and then disappeared altogether. A month, 2, 3, 6 months. I didn't understand why we hadn't had intimate relations for so long and decided to talk to my husband. Did you want passion after so many years of marriage? That doesn't happen. Ask your friends. I'm sure they're no better. My husband brushed me off. But I didn't give up. Despite the fact that we have 2 children, I tried to arrange romantic evenings, candlelit dinners, going to concerts. I even tried to drag him to a country hotel to revive the passion. My husband saw all my efforts and casually said, "If you really want it, I don't mind. But there's one condition. I must never find out about it." One day, my friend invited us to a party, but my husband, as always, refused. He turned me down pretty harshly. "You want to have fun, so go. I'll stay with the kids." At the party, I met an interesting man who I liked in appearance. We started talking, and I realized that I was interested in him. He turned out to be married, and for me, communicating with married people is taboo. But we felt so good together that evening. We both understood that the passion in our families had long since died out. After the party, we kissed, and then a stormy correspondence began. He was a very smart and creative person. You could say that I got orgasms from messages alone. A little later, real orgasms appeared. We began to meet secretly. Our relationship lasted about 5 or 6 months. During this time, I again felt desirable, confident, bright. I began to exercise, lost weight, filled with inner energy. In my family life, I also began to feel much better. One time, my lover and I were riding the subway hugging and accidentally met my boyfriend. That was enough. That night, I had to move in with my friend. I started dating my lover. He became my boyfriend. He is not a completely normal person, and the relationship with him became a serious test for me. I cheated on him too, and more than once. I got a job in another place, and one day at a corporate party, I met a guy with whom I later cheated. I went to visit him, and once, when the guy wasn't home, I dragged a new lover to my place, and in the morning, I even introduced him to the neighbors. And then I pretended that nothing had happened, and my boyfriend didn't know. I cheated on him again when we had a fight. My boyfriend said that he couldn't spend the evening with me, and I went and visited a friend whom I had only seen once before. I have very low self-esteem, and for some reason, I tried to improve it by starting relationships, having affairs on the side, and having sex with anyone. I wasn't satisfied with stable, good relationships. I quickly stopped believing in their value. After these forays, I felt good for a short time, as if I had been given an A. Relationships on the side are very exhausting, and having gotten what I wanted, I tried to end them. After all, in reality, I didn't need these people. I was just covering my internal deficit at their expense. Woman, 45. I had sex with my husband's best friend while he was in the apartment next door. By the age of 30, I was, as they say, a divorcee with a child. There were no suitable men around, and I didn't want to be alone. One day in the entrance of my building, I ran into a drunk man I didn't know. He started complimenting me and joking. It turned out that he was a guest of one of my neighbors upstairs. They were celebrating a birthday that day. We exchanged phone numbers. After this meeting, my new acquaintance began to visit my neighbor more often to see me. Once he stayed overnight, not at his friend's, but in my apartment. It's hard to explain all this, but just 2 months later, he moved in with me and called me his wife, bought my daughter presents. We created the appearance of a family, took joint photos, invited relatives to visit us. My common-law husband's friend lived 2 floors above us, so he would come over for a beer on weekends, or we would go to his place. The guy got too close to our family and it didn't end well. For a long time, I regretted that I hadn't met my own neighbor before I met his friend, who became my husband. Several times I had sex with my husband's best friend while he was practically in the next apartment. The first time was when I went to pick up a phone that my partner had forgotten. My best friend didn't reveal the truth for a long time, but then he cracked. My husband moved back in with his mother, and I hoped to continue the relationship with the neighbor. Unfortunately, nothing worked out for us, and he said a couple of times, "If only we had met differently." As far as I know, the friends continue to communicate. We can't say that everything is perfect. There will always be ups and downs in a relationship, but we have learned to appreciate each other, listen to each other, and support each other in difficult moments. We have realized that love is not only emotions, but also daily work. We continue to learn and grow together, and we believe that this is the most important thing. Subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss similar stories.